This is Lori Sonken with WRFI Radio News. My guest is Mary Anne Grady Flores. She's a peace activist and an Ithaca resident. Mary Anne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lori. It's great to be here.
So, for those of our listeners who don't know the story, Mary Anne was sentenced to a year in jail for her activities at the Hancock Air National Guard Base in Syracuse. She protests drone activities. And before we talk a little bit about the case, Mary Anne, I thought you might want to give us some background about you and your why you get involved in civil disobedience.
Oh, I'm really glad you said it that way, Lori, because I wanted to make a clarification before I tell you about me or why I do this. And one is a very important distinction in our language is that we consider ourselves to not being civilly disobedient, but civilly resisting, because we're actually there to uphold laws that I now understand are very much connected between the local ordinances of DeWitt town, where the base is located, and with our U.S. Constitution, and then Article 6, Section 2, which binds us to all the treaties and protocols that we've signed on to. So we speak of ourselves as being civil resistors, not being civilly disobedient.
Okay, that's a good clarification.
Yeah. So the reason I participate in this is I read the paper for my dear friend Joan Plume, who's actually one of the freedom riders from back in the days of challenging the Jim Crow laws. Joan wrote on the piece of paper, her contact sheet, so why do you do this? And she said, why not? And I would say the same thing. If you see something, you must say something. And we are all called to stand up and do what we can. And so when I found out that the back side of Syracuse Airport, the same campus, houses buildings where there are computer rooms where they're piloting drones and killing people, brown people, Muslims, I said to myself, I need to participate in this. And especially having community members from Ithaca who have gone before me up to the base, I decided to join them. And so united with our voices and our bodies, we go to say that we will not be complicit with our government's war crimes, which is the same theme we've been using for decades.
Well, tell us, where do those drones go?
Okay, so the drones themselves, there is a training program and a maintenance program at Hancock Air Base, and by the way, they call it the 174th Attack Fighter Wing, which is, we're not allowed to use the term attack. We're not allowed to attack anybody under the rules of engagement. For any war making, so we're violating laws even by the mere name. So the drones themselves are housed or stationed, parked in Afghanistan and possibly Pakistan. We're not sure, but we do know that they're stationed in Afghanistan from Hancock Air Base. There are other air bases that, for example, at Langley, they were responsible for the attacks that are happening with drones that are piloted in Yemen and in Somalia.
Have they killed people? Have these drones?
We know that there are over 4,000 people, including women and children, that have been killed by drones. And we also know from people that have been on the ground, friends of ours, delegations of folks that have gone to the airbase, have gone to Afghanistan, have gone to Waziristan, Pakistan, to Yemen and Somalia. We know that most of the people, 98% is what has been claimed by some, especially from the study out of NYU and Stanford called Living Under Drones, that most of the people are civilians. And that we're talking grandmothers, children, people that are out in their fields, the grandmother that was picking okra with her grandkids. We know people have been quoted as saying that there's a generation being lost by having drones hover over a community where people are now too fearful to go out to a wedding or to a funeral or to send their children to school because they don't know whether they're going to be targeted by these things that are hovering and with this buzzing going on. So there's traumatizing effects by the use of these drones in other countries.
For those of you who just turned in, my guest is Mary Anne Grady Flores. She was released last week. She was sentenced to a year in prison, but she was released while her case is on appeal. She was convicted of violating an order of protection against a man she never knew. Can you explain a little bit about what this order of protection was all about, who this person was, etc.?
Yes. So there's actually two colonels from the base. Colonel Earl A. Evans was the one who originally requested an order of protection from us that were standing at the entrances of the gate of the Hancock Air Base. And we learned of this order of protection back on October 25th, 2012, when we were being given our charges of trespass and disorderly conduct for just standing there. We had taken the Pledge of Nonviolence. We always do. I mean, the reason we go to the base is because we're concerned about people being hurt. So we choose and pledge to be nonviolent in our witness and in our lives. We pray that we're that way with everything we do. But this order was taken out by a Colonel, Earl A. Evans, who, when I stood there and I was being read this thing, you may not text, communicate, call, sexually molest, or go near the guy's place of employment. And I said, who is this person?
You wouldn't know him if you sat next to him.
Exactly. Or stood at the gas station. I would not know. And so when I was on trial this May, this man got on the stand and he said, no, I've never met this woman. I don't know Mary Anne Grady. I've never spoken to her. I'm not afraid of her. That's just a piece of paper. I just want those people away from the front of my base. In the appeal, when I was standing shackled next to my lawyer last Thursday morning, my lawyer said to the county judge, Miller, that you cannot take an order of protection out on behalf of an Air Force base. You can only take it out on behalf of a person. And so Greg Semmel, the other colonel or commander of the base, and Colonel Evans are not victims and they're not witnesses. So you have to be a victim in order to get an order of protection. So this order has been found to be invalid on behalf of one person that it was appealed on behalf of, but we have other appeals in process, and we're waiting because that kind of process takes months at times. So
you're out right now waiting to see what happens with your appeal. But you did spend 1 week in jail. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like in jail? And something about, did you receive any mail, etc.?
Yes. Well, first of all, there was a double whammy. It was really great to meet some of the women that I had met last February when we were put in jail for a disorderly conduct charge, which is being challenged. And I was saddened to see some of the same people in the jail. I have to say it's a county jail. It's not a federal prison or anything. Right. So the conditions of the jail was wonderful caring of each other by the women, by the inmates themselves, and even on the part of some of the CO officers who I got to speak to, who were open to understanding what why were we in there, which was that gave me hope to see some conversion and openness. One of the COs actually, or maybe I shouldn't even say this on the air, actually went and looked me up, and went and started speaking to some of the other inmates about me or why I was there.
Wow.
The Jamesville Correctional Facility is out in the country, so you can look out on green grass. I was able to smell some fresh air through this little screened-in flap in the window. The food is lacking. It's absolutely horrible. There wasn't even any salt, and you can't even buy salt on the commissary. We had to buy seasoned salt. Tell us about the mail. The mail. I started to get mail about the 4th or 5th day that I was there out of 7 days. So I got 3 pieces the first day, and then about 26 the next day. And then when I got a call from the women in the cell block, in the pod, they told me there were about 100 pieces of mail that had arrived. But I can show you, Lori, that the return addresses were torn off of the outside of the envelopes. So I had no way of sending a thank you note to people. And then just the leaving of the jail itself. I was brought to court on Thursday morning, not knowing whether or not I would be allowed out on a stay of execution.
This is the county court. Now,
Correct.
You were sentenced by the town of DeWitt court. Now you were before the county court.
Right, a different judge, different court. And so I was taken from Jamesville early in the morning, brought through the Syracuse downtown jail called the Justice Center, brought through the bowels of the building through a whole tunnel system, and I show up through the side door, shackled, before the court.
Did they really think you were dangerous?
No, they treat everybody this way.
Yeah.
And it's very dehumanizing, the way people are put in holding tanks. And it's amazing who's in. It's all poor people. You don't see anybody with money in there. None at all. And there are so many people without any resources, no way to contact their families, no way to let a job know that they've been picked up for, being in the car with somebody that's got a little bit of this or that, in the trunk of the car, or a lot of stuff in some cases. And so people are being sent up the river for basically nonviolent crimes and filling the jails. It's a horrific system.
You told me it took several hours for you to get out of jail. Once the judge had released you, still took...
It was about 9:30 in the morning when we were before the court, and we had a good number of people from Ithaca that had come up in cars, and it took until 9 o'clock at night for me to be released, and no one was ever told what's going on and what the right window was, or where to turn in the papers, or even the fact that the papers that they needed to post the bail with were still with me, and I was not allowed to go back to... they could have posted the bail right at Jamesville, I think. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm wrong, but I was released technically, told to sign the paper saying I'm released from Jamesville, and I was also told, sign this check for your extra commissary money. I had a bit of change in there.
And it was $5,000 in bail you had.
Right, but I had my little ID bracelet cut off from me. It's the same ID bracelet I used to go into the Justice Center with earlier in the day to be at the court. So they knew who I was. Well, they clipped that ID bracelet, and they made me go through booking all over again. After I had put my clothes on, given my belt again, put my hair up in a ponytail, they took all that away from me again when I got down to the Justice Center to wait in order to be re-fingerprinted, re-photoed, have a new wrist bracelet, 4 hours more, and never told what this process was about. Meanwhile, the people are outside having no clue as to what's going on inside. And and here I am, a privileged white person with retired professors outside waiting for me. They got treated poorly. Imagine the runaround and the injustice that is perpetrated against people of color and the poor.
So, Mary Anne, what other activities are on the horizon?
There will be another 20-something trials coming up over the course of the next year and a half. The main thing is that we want people to help have a court presence. It's such an amazing a place of learning for those of us that are not familiar with this process. It opens our eyes to how the courts are so in the pockets of the base, and we need to challenge that by our mere presence in the courtroom.